I didn't expect anything real to come out of that night. It was just a birthday party. Too loud, too warm, the kind where you show up because a mutual friend guilt texted you 3 times and promised there'd be good alcohol. I almost didn't go. If I'd stayed home, none of this would have happened. And honestly, that thought still messes with me. It was our friend Leo's birthday. Late 20s, rooftop apartment, string lights everywhere like he was trying to fake a Pinterest life he absolutely did not live. I showed up already half drained from the week, holding a six-pack I forgot to chill. I remember thinking I'd stay an hour, make my appearance, then Irish goodbye. That plan lasted maybe 10 minutes. I was standing near the kitchen island, pretending to be interested in a conversation about someone's toxic workplace, when Leo clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, "Oh, you haven't met Julian yet." I turned, and there he was, not in a movie star way, no dramatic slow motion, just solid. Tall, relaxed posture, dark hair that looked like it had never seen a styling product in its life. He wore a simple black t-shirt, sleeves slightly rolled, like he didn't realize how much that mattered. He smiled when he met my eyes, not wide or flashy, just easy, familiar almost. "Hey," he said, "you're Caleb, right?" That alone caught me off guard. I hadn't said my name. "Yeah," I replied. "You're Julian." He laughed softly. "Guilty." We shook hands. Normal. Casual. Except his grip lingered half a second longer than necessary, and my brain absolutely short-circuited over it. Leo drifted away almost immediately. Classic Leo. Leaving us there with the low thump of music and overlapping conversations filling the space between us. I remember thinking it might get awkward, but it didn't. Not even a little. We talked about dumb things at first. How we both hated rooftop parties but loved Leo enough to suffer through them. How the city felt smaller every year. He told me he worked in urban planning. Something about that felt very him. Grounded. Thoughtful. I told him what I did, and he actually asked follow-up questions, like he cared instead of waiting for his turn to speak. At some point, I realized we'd drifted toward the edge of the roof, away from everyone else. The music was quieter there. The city lights stretched out below us, blinking and alive. He leaned against the railing, shoulder angled slightly toward me, like his body had already decided something his mouth hadn't caught up to yet. "So," he said, glancing at me sideways, "are you here for the whole night? Or are you the kind of guy who disappears without saying goodbye?" I smirked. I plead the fifth. "That bad, huh?" "I'm trying to be better," I admitted. "Showing up is the hard part. Staying feels optional." He nodded, like that made sense. "I get that." There was a pause. Not uncomfortable, just quiet enough to feel loaded. The kind of silence where you become very aware of how close someone is standing. Of the fact that his arm was inches from mine, of how the breeze carried his cologne, clean, subtle, nothing aggressive. I told myself not to read into it. That this was just flirting, harmless, fun. Then he said, "I'm really glad Leo introduced us." And the way he said it, low, sincere, hit me harder than I expected. "Yeah," I replied. "Me too." That was the moment, the exact one where something shifted, even if neither of us named it yet. We were still strangers, still safe, but there was an undercurrent there, unmistakable, like standing at the edge of something deeper and pretending you don't feel the drop. Later, when someone suggested shots, Julian leaned in and asked, "You in?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, why not?" As we walked back toward the noise, his hand brushed the small of my back. Brief, almost accidental, but it stayed with me, burned. I remember thinking, this is more than flirting. And I remember being absolutely terrified of how much I wanted to find out where it might lead. The shots were a mistake, not in the sloppy blackout way, just enough to blur the edges of my caution, enough to make everything feel warmer, closer. Julian stood next to me at the counter, shoulders brushing as Leo poured tequila like he was trying to prove something to the universe. "Bad idea?" Julian murmured to me, lifting his glass. "Definitely," I said. "Cheers to that." We drank. I winced. He laughed, head tipping back for just a second, and I caught myself staring at his throat, the way it moved when he swallowed. I looked away fast, hoping he hadn't noticed, but he had. I could tell by the look he gave me. Soft, curious, not teasing. The rest of the party faded into background noise after that. We kept gravitating back to each other, even when we tried not to. Every time someone pulled one of us into a conversation, it only lasted a few minutes before one of us found an excuse to check back in. It felt natural, easy, dangerous. At one point, we ended up sitting on the low couch near the balcony door, knees angled toward each other. Our conversation drifted into deeper territory, past jobs, past cities, the strange loneliness of being surrounded by people, but still feeling unseen. "I don't open up easily," Julian said, staring into his drink. "I've gotten good at being pleasant, approachable, but actually letting someone in?" He shrugged. "That's harder." I nodded. "Same. I disappear instead." He looked at me then, really looked. "Why?" The question landed heavier than I expected. I thought about dodging it, about making a joke. Instead, I exhaled. "Because it's easier to leave before someone decides they don't want you around anymore." There it was. Too honest. Too soon. Julian didn't flinch. He didn't rush to reassure me or change the subject. He just said, quietly, "Yeah, I know that feeling." Something loosened in my chest. The party started thinning out after midnight. Leo was already tipsy and emotional, hugging everyone like it was his last night on Earth. I checked my phone, half expecting to feel relief at having an excuse to go. Instead, I felt this odd resistance, like leaving would mean breaking a thread I'd just started to follow. Julian stood beside me near the door as people said their goodbyes. "You heading out?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Probably should." "Same." We lingered, that awkward but not awkward pause, where neither person wants to be the first to move. I could feel the moment stretching, asking something of us. "Well," I said, gesturing vaguely, "it was really good meeting you." "Yeah," he replied, "it really was." Another beat. Then he added, "Do you want to keep talking? Like, not just as Leo's friends." My heart kicked hard. "I'd like that," I said, trying to sound casual and failing just a little. He smiled, relief flashing across his face. "Good." We exchanged numbers. His thumb brushed mine as he handed my phone back. That tiny contact felt louder than the music ever had. Outside, the night air was cooler. We walked down the stairs together, slower than necessary. "I'm glad you didn't Irish goodbye," he said. "Me too," I admitted. At the bottom of the stairs we stopped. The city hummed around us. Cars passing, distant laughter, life continuing like nothing monumental had just happened. We stood there, close enough that I could feel his warmth. For a second, I thought he might lean in. I wasn't sure if I wanted him to, or if I was terrified he would. He didn't. Instead, he said, "Text me when you get home?" "Yeah," I said softly. "I will." We hugged. Quick, polite, but his hand pressed firmly between my shoulder blades, grounding. When we pulled apart, his eyes lingered on mine. "Good night, Caleb." "Good night, Julian." I walked away before I could overthink it. Halfway down the block, my phone buzzed. "Julian, already glad I met you." I stared at the screen, smiling like an idiot, chest buzzing with something new and fragile, and very real. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the urge to disappear. Julian didn't text me right away the next day, and I told myself I was fine with that. I went through my usual routine, coffee, emails, half paying attention to a meeting, while my brain replayed the night before on a loop. His smile, the way he listened. That moment at the bottom of the stairs where everything felt suspended. I kept checking my phone without meaning to, then getting annoyed at myself for caring. Around noon, my phone buzzed. "Julian, hope you're surviving the day. I'm still thinking about last night." I stared at the message longer than necessary, a stupid grin spreading across my face. Me, barely surviving, Worth it, though. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Julian, want to grab a drink sometime this week? Just us. Just us. My chest tightened in that good, terrifying way. Me. Yeah, I'd really like that. We settled on Thursday. A low-key bar he liked. Quiet enough to talk. Loud enough not to feel like an interrogation. The rest of the week crawled. Every message we exchanged was easy, natural, like we'd already found a rhythm. Nothing overly flirty, but not distant either. A steady build. By Thursday evening, I was way more nervous than I wanted to admit. I changed shirts twice, debated whether I was trying too hard, ultimately settled on something simple. Clean, familiar, me. Julian was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small table near the back. He stood when he saw me, smiling in that same easy way that had gotten under my skin days ago. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I replied, suddenly hyper-aware of my hands, my posture, everything. We hugged, this time a little longer, more certain. Conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about childhoods, about the weird in-between stage of life we were both in. He told me about a long-term relationship that had ended a year ago, not bitterly, just honestly. "I think I forgot how to start something new," he admitted. "You get used to knowing where things are going," I nodded. "Yeah, starting feels riskier than staying, even when staying isn't right." He watched me for a second, then smiled softly. "You're really good at saying things I don't realize I'm thinking." That stayed with me. By the second drink, the air between us had shifted. There was more eye contact, longer pauses. His knee brushed mine under the table and didn't move away. Neither did mine. "So," he said, voice lower now, "can I ask you something kind of direct?" I swallowed. "Sure. Are you actually looking for something real right now? Or are you more in a, let's see what happens place?" The question made my pulse spike. Old instincts told me to deflect, to keep it light. Instead, I forced myself to stay where I was. "I want something real," I said slowly. "I'm just bad at trusting that it won't disappear." Julian nodded. "That's fair." He reached across the table then, resting his hand over mine. Warm, steady. My breath caught, but I didn't pull away. "I'm not in a rush," he said, "but I am intentional. And I wouldn't be here if I didn't want to see where this could go." Something in his tone, calm, grounded, made my defenses wobble. When we left the bar, the night felt quieter, more intimate. We walked side by side, hands brushing, until eventually they just stayed together. Fingers laced. Simple. Huge. Outside my building, we stopped. That same charged pause from the birthday night, but heavier now. Earned. "I had a really good time," he said. "Me too." For a second, neither of us moved. Then Julian leaned in, not rushed, not hesitant. Just sure. The kiss was soft, exploratory. His hand slid to my waist, grounding me as my brain short-circuited in the best way. I kissed him back, slower than I usually would have, letting it unfold instead of rushing ahead. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "Can I see you again?" he asked quietly. I smiled, feeling something warm and steady settle in my chest. "Yeah, I'd like that a lot." As I watched him walk away, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't afraid of what might happen next. I was actually looking forward to it. Our second date wasn't planned so much as it happened. Julian texted me Saturday morning, nothing dramatic. "Julian, I'm walking to the farmer's market. Want to join?" I stared at the message in bed, hair a mess, brain already overthinking how casual was too casual. Then I laughed at myself and typed back, "Me, only if you promise good coffee. Julian, I make no promises, but I have strong opinions." That felt right. We met near the park, sunlight filtering through the trees, the city feeling softer than usual. Julian wore a hoodie, and sneakers, hands in his pockets, looking somehow even more attractive without trying. He smiled when he saw me. Wide this time, unmistakable. "Hey," he said, leaning in for a quick kiss. Public. Easy. Like it belonged there. It sent a quiet thrill through me. The morning unfolded slowly. We wandered between stalls, shared pastries, argued lightly about bread like it mattered. At one point, he reached for my hand without looking, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I let him. My chest felt full in a way I wasn't used to. We ended up sitting on the grass with coffees, people watching. "You seem more relaxed today," Julian said. I shrugged. "I think I'm less scared." "Of me?" he asked, half smiling. "Of liking someone," I admitted. "Same difference." He considered that, then nodded. "I like that you're honest about it." I glanced at him. "You don't mind?" "No," he said simply. "I mind when people pretend they don't care." Something about that settled deep in me. Later, as the afternoon stretched on, neither of us made a move to leave. Eventually, Julian tilted his head toward me. "Do you want to come back to my place?" he asked, careful, open. "No pressure, just hang out." I felt the familiar flicker of fear, the instinct to slow down, to protect myself, but underneath it was something steadier. "Yeah," I said. "I do." His apartment was warm and lived in. Plants by the window, books stacked everywhere, music playing softly in the background. We kicked off our shoes, collapsed onto the couch. At first, we talked. Then we didn't. The first time he kissed me there, it was different, deeper, less tentative. His hand slid to the back of my neck, thumb brushing just under my ear. I leaned into him without thinking. We took our time, checked in with each other in quiet ways, glances, pauses, soft questions. It wasn't rushed or overwhelming, just intentional. When we finally ended up tangled together, it felt less like crossing a line, and more like stepping into something we'd already agreed on. After, we lay there, catching our breath. His arm was draped over my chest, fingers absent-mindedly tracing slow lines. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, surprised by how true it was. "More than okay." He smiled, kissed my shoulder. "Good." I stayed longer than I planned, long enough for the light to change, for the city outside to settle. When I finally got up to leave, there was no awkwardness, just a shared understanding that this wasn't a one-time thing. At the door, Julian pulled me into a hug, firm and grounding. "I'm really glad we're doing this," he said quietly. "Me too," I replied. Walking home, I felt something unfamiliar but welcome. Hope, steady, cautious, real. Not the kind that explodes all at once, the kind you build. What surprised me most wasn't how fast things were moving. It was how steady they felt. Julian didn't suddenly become the center of my world. We didn't text nonstop or make dramatic declarations. We just showed up for each other. Coffee during lunch breaks, walks after work, lazy evenings where we cooked something simple and talked about our days like it mattered. Because it did. And that scared me more than the intensity ever could have. One night, about 2 weeks in, I caught myself standing in his kitchen while he chopped vegetables, watching him move around the space like he belonged there. Like I belonged there too. The thought hit me out of nowhere, sharp and uninvited. I could get used to this. That was the moment I pulled back. Not visibly, not in a way he could immediately call out. Just internally. I laughed a little less, held back small truths, left a bit earlier than I wanted to. Julian noticed. Of course he did. "Hey," he said one evening as we sat on his couch, my head resting on his shoulder. "You've been a little quieter lately." My stomach dropped. "I'm fine," I said automatically. He turned to face me, gentle but direct. "You don't have to do that with me." Silence stretched between us. I stared at the floor, heart pounding. "I'm not great at this part," I admitted. "The part where things are good and I don't know when the other shoe drops." He didn't interrupt, didn't rush me. "I keep waiting for the moment you realize I'm too much, or not enough, or that this was fun but temporary." I swallowed. "So I start preparing for that, even when there's no sign it's coming." Julian reached for my hand, thumb brushing slow circles over my knuckles. "I'm not looking for temporary," he said, but I need to know you'll tell me when you're scared, instead of pulling away. I looked at him then, really looked. There was no pressure in his expression. No ultimatum, just honesty. I can try, I said quietly. That's all I'm asking, he replied. Something shifted after that, not magically. Fear doesn't vanish just because someone reassures you, but it softened. It became something I could talk about, instead of something that ran me. We met Leo for drinks one night, sat across from him while he grinned like he'd won the lottery. So, Leo said, pointing between us, "This is actually happening, huh?" Julian laughed. "Seems like it." I smiled, feeling a strange mix of pride and vulnerability. Being seen like this, chosen, still felt new. Later, walking home, Julian squeezed my hand. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, just realizing I'm not hiding anymore. He leaned in, kissed my temple. "Good." The real test came unexpectedly. One afternoon, Julian texted me. "Julian, can we talk tonight?" Nothing bad, just something important. My chest tightened instantly. Old instincts flared. But when I got to his place, he was calm, thoughtful. "I might get offered a position in another city," he said carefully. "It's not definite, and it wouldn't be for a few months. But I didn't want to keep it from you." I absorbed that, heart racing. Distance. Change. The kind of thing I used to treat as a reason to disappear early. "What does that mean for us?" I asked, voice steady despite everything. He met my eyes. "I don't know yet. I just know I want to figure it out with you, not around you." The honesty, the inclusion, hit hard. "Okay," I said after a moment. "Then we'll talk about it. Together." He smiled, relief clear. "Yeah." That night, lying beside him, I realized something important. I wasn't staying because it was easy. I was staying because it mattered. And for the first time, that felt like strength, not risk. The waiting was the hardest part. Not because Julian was pulling away. He wasn't. If anything, he became more present, more deliberate. Like he was quietly making room for me in his life while we both pretended not to notice how much was riding on that unspoken if. Weeks passed. We settled into something that felt like a relationship without ever officially labeling it. Friends knew. Leo definitely knew. He'd started referring to Julian as "your guy" with zero subtlety. I didn't correct him. Julian stayed over more often. Sometimes we worked side by side, in comfortable silence. Sometimes we talked until way too late about nothing and everything. I learned how he took his coffee, how he paced when he was thinking, how he went quiet before saying something that mattered. One night, lying in bed, he traced lazy shapes on my arm. "If I get the offer," he said quietly, "I want you to come visit. Even if we don't know what it means yet." My instinct was to say, "Of course," immediately. Instead, I paused, forced myself not to promise out of fear. "I'd like that," I said. "I just don't want to pretend it won't be hard." He turned toward me. "Thank you for saying that." A few days later, the call came. He told me the same night. No build-up, no dramatic speech, just honesty. "They offered it," he said, sitting across from me at his kitchen table. "It's a great opportunity." I nodded slowly, letting it land. My chest felt tight, but not panicked. "When would you go?" I asked. 3 months, he said. "If I accept." "If?" I repeated. He reached for my hand. "I haven't yet." That meant something. We talked for hours that night. About distance, about expectations, about the fact that neither of us wanted to sacrifice ourselves just to avoid loss. It wasn't romantic in a movie way, but it was real, and that felt better. A week later, we took a short trip together. Nothing big. A quiet coastal town. Cheap Airbnb. Too much walking. It rained the first day, trapping us inside. We cooked, listened to music, danced badly in the kitchen. At one point, Julian pulled me close, resting his forehead against mine. "You know," he said, "I didn't expect this. Meeting you?" "Yeah," I said softly. Me neither. But I'm really glad it happened. So was I. The last night, lying in the dark, I said the thing I'd been holding back. I'm scared, I admitted. But I don't want fear to make my decisions anymore. Julian squeezed my hand. Whatever we choose it honestly. In the end, he accepted the job, not because he was running, but because it mattered to him. And I didn't want to be the reason he said no to something he'd worked toward for years. We didn't break up. We didn't promise forever either. We promised effort. Airport goodbyes are always quieter than you expect, less dramatic, more heavy. When he hugged me, he whispered, "This isn't the end." I smiled through the tightness in my chest. No, it's just different. Months later, I visited him. New city, new routines. The same look in his eyes when he saw me walk toward him. Some things didn't change. Standing there, suitcase in hand, I realized how far I'd come. From someone who disappeared at the first sign of uncertainty to someone willing to stay, even when the outcome wasn't guaranteed. Love didn't fix me, but it taught me how to stand my ground. And that was more than flirting reply could ever promise. The distance didn't magically get easier. Anyone who says long distance either works or doesn't is lying. What it actually does is expose everything, every insecurity, every habit, every way you communicate when things are good and when they're not. Julian and I argued more in those first months apart than we ever had before. Not screaming matches. Quiet tension. Missed calls. Time zones that made one of us always a little tired, a little behind. There were nights I stared at my phone, thumb hovering, wondering if this was the moment I'd finally say, "I can't do this anymore." Old versions of me would have. But then there were other nights. The good ones. The kind that rewired me. Like the first time he called just to show me the view from his window. City lights unfamiliar but beautiful, and said, "I wish you were seeing this with me." Or the time I had a rough week and tried to brush it off, only for him to say, gently but firmly, "No, stay, tell me." So I did. Months passed. Visits became more frequent, less tentative. His place started to feel like ours when I was there. I left a toothbrush, then clothes, then books I pretended I didn't mind leaving behind. One night, curled together on his couch after a long day, Julian turned to me and said, "I don't want us to just survive this." I looked at him. "What do you want then?" "I want to build something," he said, "even if it takes time." That was the first time we said it out loud. Not "I love you," not yet, but the intention behind it. The first "I love you" came later, quietly, almost accidentally. We were half asleep, bodies familiar now, the kind of closeness that didn't need constant reassurance. He kissed my shoulder and murmured it, like he wasn't sure I was awake. "I love you, Caleb." I didn't freeze, didn't deflect, didn't joke. I turned toward him, heart steady for once, and said, "I love you too." And it felt right. Not explosive, not terrifying. Right. A year after Leah's birthday party, we stood on that same rooftop again. Different party. Same string lights. Leah was older, louder, just as dramatic. Julian stood beside me, arm around my waist like it had always belonged there. "Funny," Julian said softly, leaning in. "This is where it started." I smiled. "I almost didn't come." "I'm really glad you did." "Me too." Because that night wasn't just about meeting someone, it was about staying, about not disappearing when something real showed up, about learning that love isn't the absence of fear, it's choosing not to let fear drive. Julian didn't save me, but loving him taught me how to stand still long enough to be found. And that was everything.